Welcome back to Daytime here on Rogers TV. Well, let me tell you, I love to travel. We all know that I love to travel, but this guy, this guy roughs it, and he has done absolutely everything. The stories he can tell is unbelievable, and we are lucky because he's put them all in a book through Travel and Error. He joins us today, author Matt Hamilton and world traveler extraordinaire. It's good to see you again,
Great
Matt.
to be seen.
Welcome back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you. Well, we did chat briefly one time about some of your experiences, and you've been kind enough to actually share some of your travel tips with us today. But first off, tell everybody at home what makes you a travel expert, a brief background, if you will, of what you've done so far.
Well, first and foremost, I mean, what I have done, anybody can do. The hardest part about giving things up and going away and traveling is actually making that decision.
Right.
And we'll jump back 12 years ago, and I was sitting here in the rat race in a job that I really didn't like, watching life pass by, and was quite unhappy. And I made this decision to go find myself, go explore the world, get outside the North American bubble. So I got rid of all my possessions, bought a backpack and a one-way flight to Glasgow, Scotland, and said, I'm going to go around the world, and no timeline. If I like a spot, I'll stay, and if I don't, I'll move on. Simple as that. Jump ahead 12 years later, I still haven't touched South America. I discovered this fascinating world out there.
And am I right? I mean, you said that this was 12 years. You thought you would do it in around 2 years, right?
2 years.
You thought, oh, 2 years, I'll stop here, I'll stop there. But something happened along the way that really set you off track, and I think it was called South Africa.
It was
right?
called South Africa. I was about 6 months into my trip, and I'd actually just spent 4 months working in the Canary Islands. Before I began my travels, my longest trip had been 2 weeks. So, I mean, I really had no idea how long this trip around the world was going to take. And I remember this girl that I'd met in Dublin who told me about Cape Town. Well, Africa is part of the world, so I decided to fly into Cape Town, spend 3 weeks in South Africa, and then figure out how I was going to get to Cairo. Well, I landed in Cape Town. I was absolutely blown away with what I discovered. I had zero expectations of the place. I knew about apartheid and Nelson Mandela. And what I found there was a fascinating and friendly people, a diverse culture, a diverse landscape. And I just fell in love with everything. And then I happened to land a quite amazing job running a pub on a 17-kilometer white sandy beach.
Oh, yeah, well, that ought to do it, right?
Well, yeah, and my 3-week trip to South Africa turned into 2 years.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
And it became my home away from home, and I've actually been back for probably another 4 years over the last 6 years since.
Wow. And were you there just recently for the World Cup?
I was there recently, but I came back just before the World Cup. I mean, and I got grief from absolutely everybody. Even the bathroom attendant in Joburg International questioned me, why am I leaving? I figured I needed to come home and spread the word about this magical country. And I'm so proud after watching the World Cup. They did such a phenomenal job.
Yeah,
and I think
it did
has
great things for their country, and they did a great job hosting, it seemed.
Amazing, amazing. So proud.
It's really impressive to sit here and listen to you. You can feel the pride that you have for that country as well as your own. You know, you seem to almost share a nationality, if you will, right? Is that how it feels?
Well, I call myself Can-African.
Can-African.
Part Canadian, part African. I was warned before I went, and this is true to anybody who's going. Something happens when you get to Africa. Something gets inside your heart and your soul that makes it very, very difficult to leave. And then if you are able to leave, you'll have this incredible urge to go back. Every single day, no matter where I am in the world, I think of Africa.
That's pretty incredible for you to say, because I have been on your website, and by the way, his website is fantastic to read about his travels. I have been on your website, and you've done a lot of things. You have so many stories to tell all over the world. So to hear you say that about South Africa is pretty impressive. I did mention at the top there that I promised our viewers at home that you would share some of your tips for traveling, because as I said, you had no money, you had nothing, you ran into some pretty crazy situations here and there. But what would you say are your top few tips, if you will, for if somebody is at home going, I really want to backpack around the world or even Europe or whatever, what should they consider?
Well, I think the first thing is get off the beaten path. I find that touristy places are often, they've lost some of their genuine, authentic hospitality. Business is what's driving them now. I find the places that aren't in the guidebooks, they're the places that really bring you in. And to be honest, the places that aren't in the guidebooks have been my favorite spots in the world. Places like Mpande or Sinsa or Rasabougalum. Places that you've never heard of have captured me for so many reasons. So that is, throw away a guidebook. Don't have expectations. Expectations are
because people tend to plan their travel, right?
For sure, and I mean that's the other thing. My philosophy is the best plan is no plan. Okay. Expect the unexpected. You can only be pleasantly surprised when you don't have expectations.
Very true. Good point.
It is true. And a place like South Africa, where I had no expectations, I was just overwhelmed. So when you get to a spot, expect the unexpected. Maybe have a scenario. I don't like calling them plans because plans sound set in stone. Have a scenario for what might unfold, because if you get to a spot and you are captured by its beauty or by the people, it's a shame to have to leave in 3 days because that's what you planned while you're sitting back in Canada.
because you've pre-booked something, blah, 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 months ago.
Exactly, and take your time. That's the other thing. I lived in this beautiful place, and I was amazed at how many people would come for a night. Click a few pictures and go on. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you haven't really experienced Sinsa. You may have seen it, but you haven't felt it. And after a few days in a place, you've stopped looking at the view and you've stopped looking at the ocean, and you start to use other senses. Like you start to listen to what people have to say, and that's when you really learn about a place and you really connect with a place.
Matt, do you love to travel alone, and why? Like, do you prefer to be by yourself, or do you recommend having a traveling companion?
Well, personally, I prefer the freedom of traveling alone, because it really is complete and total freedom. You can do whatever you want, when you want, with who you want, no compromising. You really are able to find yourself. So if you're traveling with a partner, you want them to share that same... You know what, and if you're traveling with a partner, that's great, and I have traveled with friends, but be in a position where you should be able to say to each other, okay, I'm going this way for a couple weeks. I'll meet you there in 3.
Right.
And go off in your own direction, because that really does allow you to, as I say, find yourself. And the biggest misconception about traveling alone is that you're alone. You're never, never alone. There are so many other travelers around you. People living in the villages that you're at. There's always
the culture, meet people.
I mean, you're just, when you're traveling alone, you're almost forced into a position where you need to strike up conversations. And for me, that's the other juice of traveling, and the places you see, but it's the people you meet. You can be in South Africa and be meeting people from Brazil, England, Australia, all over the world in this one place, and when you're alone, you really
that's all
you
part
find
of the
these people.
experience.
So don't
well, you can really
afraid.
feel your passion for this. It's really evident that you know what you're talking about. We appreciate you sharing some of those great tips with us today. I want to tell everybody, pick up the book. It's full of fantastic stories, and also visit his website, because he has his book signings on there. He's got all kinds of information, great stories that he tells right on his website too. It's madmaddiesworld.com. We're going to take a quick break. We're right back after this. We're going to have some fun with Isabel from the Museum of Science and Technology. Don't go away.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Great to talk to you.
Great talking.